Good afternoon. Have the privilege to close this session. I'll try to do it very quickly. As I was thinking what to say, to not repeat much of what had been already said, a very basic and I think obvious conclusion came to my mind, which is the pandemic changed my life. And when I say that, I strongly believe I can also say that it has changed each one of your lives too, both personally and professionally. And throughout this process, I believe we all learned to be more resilient, more inclusive, and we gave more importance to sustainability and equity. We were able to rise together. And that's how I want to conclude it today. I want to talk to you about RISE, R-I-S-E, which stands for Resilience, Inclusion, Sustainability, and Equity. As the leader of a company that stepped up during the pandemic, and we were able to many times do what we thought was impossible possible, I believe these four elements were crucial to achieve what we achieved. And when I think about the future and what we've been discussing, I also strongly believe that these four elements are going to be important for all of us to build healthier economies, healthier population. The impacts of the pandemic have been severe, and I don't want to go in detail on that. There was a number of things that were said today here, but we cannot forget the tremendous impact on the millions of lives lost. Every conversation about that has to put that up front so that we work together to try to avoid that. But the impact on mental health, education, cultural and social development, and even the treatment of communicable and non-communicable diseases, we're only starting to see, and probably we will see in many years to come. The impact in the economy also, I think, merits no further discussion. It has been already presented a lot. Suffice for me to say that we now know that on average, Latin American countries had a negative decrease on their GDP of 1 percentage points higher than the developed world. And when we think that most of our countries have a very big informal economy, some countries are over 60%, and most of the time this sector is not included in these statistics, probably the impact on the economy of the pandemic of our countries in the region was much severe. And again, will take some years to recuperate. Now, I'm not saying something new here. The adverse effect of lack of health in growth and economy and productivity was something that we knew before the pandemic. It was only now that it just got pushed to a whole different level. But there's a direct link we already knew between communicable diseases and economy. But there's also the impact of non-communicable diseases on the economy. A study showed that a 10% increase on non-communicable diseases will generate a 0.5 percentage points of negative GDP growth. The same study projected that by 2030, it's only 8 years from now, there's going to be a 50% increase on non-communicable diseases in Latin America. That in itself will represent a negative 2.5 percentage points of GDP growth, something our countries and our region cannot afford. So we have to take measures, as it was being discussed, to prevent this from happening and make sure that we have effective treatments when needed. Now, despite the severity of what has happened, there is also important lessons that we should take out of this. I would like to share with you two that for me are important. The first one, it should be clear to all of us that we can all only overcome the greatest challenges if we work together. Let's rise together. The second learning that was also very evident because of what happened is that, I'll use an analogy. The oil that makes the machinery of the world is health. if that oil is not there, then that machinery will not work. And again, the evidence is out there that's clear of that link. What's also very clear is no matter how rich the country was or how poor the country was, all of them were impacted. So there is this inextricable connection between health and economy. And when we think about the future and how we can get ready for a future situation like this and get ready, we cannot forget about this inextricable link between health and economy. That's why, and it was said here, investment in health is not a nice to have. It's a must to have. It's a must have to strengthen, maintain societies and our economies. When we invest in health, we are investing in growth, we are investing in stability, we are investing in a productive workforce. When we think of health as a cost, then there's this assumption that it has to be something that needs to be controlled, that we should take measures to reduce it, and that the expansion of it's negative. And nothing can be contrary to the truth. There's already ample evidence that shows that over the last number of years, decades, about 1/3 of GDP growth in developed countries had a direct relationship with better health. On the same token, if we underinvest in public infrastructure, in public health, we're putting an additional pressure of millions of dollars into society, government, state. So there is a clear link between economy and health, but it's not only in terms of pandemic or in moments of pandemic. It is clearly a link between health and economy for communicable and non-communicable diseases. Now, out of all this, the same way that there's learnings, I believe there's opportunity to apply these learnings. And we should work together, to rise together, to apply these opportunities. I want to cover very quickly with you 3 areas in which I believe we need to rise together. The first one is the strengthening of public policy. Public policy is the scaffolding of efficient, productive systems. And in particular, we need to improve the regulatory processes in most of our countries. We also have to look back. During the pandemic, most of, if not all, the regulatory agencies really step up and were part of a fundamental collaboration to achieve what we achieved. But we know that that's not necessarily the reality in every day. There's still need for further harmonization, clear procedures, and transparent procedures in our regulatory agencies, and the need for reliance mechanism with other parts of the world. We saw very important measures to expedite the approval of much-needed vaccines or tests. However, the reality of our countries shows that contrary to that, there is a delay in many of our countries to get the approval of new technologies. Let's quickly discuss the case of clinical trials. Clinical trials are an important source of investment and technology transfer to our countries. However, in average in Latin America, there's a delay of 2 to 3 times the average that it's taken to get approved clinical trials in other parts of the world. That becomes a huge competitive disadvantage. Same way, the approval of new technologies. Many countries, there are no clear processes, transparent processes, and there are very long delays that are making that our new technology are not saving the lives that it can be changed and the direct impact on the economy. So we need to rise together and improve the regulatory process. But as we all seen also these past years, it's not enough to get something approved if it's not getting to the patient's hands. So for that, as it was discussed, we need reliable, sufficient supply chains based on international best practices, and we need value-based procurement models. And these procurement models have to have the patient as the center of what we do and how we do it. For that, again, we have to change the way we think and move from cost to investment. Investment based on long-term strategy, transparent resource allocation, and science-based outcome decisions. With that, as President Duque was saying, we will be able to have evidence-based policymaking and having the patient as the center of it. That is what we have to do. McKinsey studies show that $1 investment in the economy has a direct impact on the economy of $2 to $4. For that, we need metrics. We need metrics, as it was said by Guillermo, that allow us to assess, evaluate policy interventions, and allow for evidence-based prioritization. That's not going to be easy to be achieved if, as also was repeatedly said here, we transform the way we work and we take collaboration to a different level. What we achieved over the past 2 years was in no small part thanks to huge and different levels of cooperation, public, private, private to private. We need to rely on that to become more efficient. That's why forums like this are extremely important, because they generate the opportunity to discuss and hopefully to take concrete actions. One of those additional actions in which we need to work together is the removal of barriers to trade and investment in health financing, as we were saying. But we cannot forget also the importance of combating corruption. Many of these long-term new models based on outcomes require a level playing field. So public and private enterprise need to continue working in integrity and transparency. So let's rise together in this area as well. And to finalize, technology. Technology is clearly the big opportunity we have to achieve different things, to create these models based on outcomes of patients. We've already seen positive impacts of the use of technology and digital in the area of health. We can go back to what Guillermo was saying and what he's doing. We need to work more with startups, because very likely the breakthrough that we need in terms of outcome models is going to come through technology, digital, and the startups. The case of telemedicine was brought here to us by the Secretary of Health. And in the region, we have seen tremendous advances in this area as well. But as he correctly said, there's still an important area to improve in regulation and clarity to make telemedicine even more beneficial to our countries. So we need to rise together to make technology and digital part of what we do. So as I conclude, I'm calling on the hemisphere's leaders, both private enterprises, civil society, and governments, to build health systems that are resilient, that provide inclusion, that are sustainable, and that are equitable. I laid out very quickly 3 areas. The first one is improvement in regulatory processes so that we can have new technologies sooner and transparently. The second, the removal of barriers to health financing so that we can take advantage of new models based on outcomes of patients. And finally, leverage technology and digital to allow us to achieve that. We're calling on the leaders to set up an annual multi-sectorial forum, America's Rising Health, with the active participation of the private sector and civil society that will create an enduring mechanism to have this type of discussions and collaboration with the governments. The pandemic changed my life. The pandemic changed your life. The pandemic changed the life of all the citizens of Latin America. Let's make of that an opportunity to become more resilient, inclusive, sustainable, equitable, for healthier population, healthier economies. Thank you. Enjoy the lunch.